Hi, folks. Let's talk about America in 2025, where murder gets a standing ovation and free speech gets a firing squad. We're living in a time where stabbing a white teenager can earn you $500,000, but saying the wrong word gets you digitally executed, then mocked for trying to rebuild. This isn't justice, it's narrative roulette. A self-confessed teen murderer's defense fund is celebrated as activism, while a mother losing her cool and saying something she shouldn't is treated like karmic punishment. Same system, different outcomes, depending entirely on the role you're assigned. So today we're pulling back the curtain on the hypocrisy industrial complex, where truth is optional, race is currency, and outrage is just another commodity. Now, in order to get the full scope of the situation, we have to start at the beginning. A few weeks ago, 17-year-old Karmelo Anthony stabbed a white high school football player named Austin Metcalf during a rain delay at a Texas track meet. According to police, the altercation began when Metcalf told Anthony to leave his team's tent. Words were exchanged, tensions escalated, and then Anthony allegedly reached into his bag, pulled out a knife, and stabbed Metcalf in the chest, which caused Metcalf to die in the arms of his twin brother. Anthony reportedly admitted to the stabbing, but called it self-defense. While the case is pending in court, Anthony's family launched a fundraiser on GiveSendGo that has now pulled in over $500,000. Most of that, we're told, will go towards his legal defense. The rest, well, rent for their $900,000 gated community home, flashy vehicles in the driveway, and security, a catch-all term that in 2025 it probably just means optics management. Now, that alone would be enough to spark outrage, but this is America 2.0, where the left has made crime never just a crime, it's the narrative that follows. What made this case explode wasn't just the brutality of the stabbing, it was how quickly a murder suspect became a cultural symbol, defended, funded, and in some corners of the internet, lionized. The same people who say abolish the police rallied around a confessed killer as if he were the latest victim of injustice because the identity boxes checked the right alignment on their ideological chessboard. Now, meanwhile, a few weeks later, across the country, a woman named Shiloh Hendrix was caught on camera hurling a racial slur during an argument at a park. No physical violence, no weapons, just words. Ugly, offensive, and indefensible words. Anyway, before we go any further, here's a clip.
Did you call the word? It is my business. You call him a Okay, why don't you have the boss to say it right now again?
Fuck you,
Alright, that's what you say.
You're not digging through people's shit, you dumb fuck.
Nobody digging into your shit.
A little fucking kid just did, you dumbass.
That little kid, you call him a little child?
What if he acts like one? It's gonna...
Are you about to hit him? You chase him here?
He took my son's stuff.
So that gives you the right to call the child 5 years old the N-word.
If that's what he's gonna act
That's what you're gonna call him.
That's what he's gonna act like.
You know, that's a hate speech. And you can be recorded for that.
I don't give a shit.
Huh.
Fuck off.
Okay, we'll see about that, what the internet has to say about you.
Now, within hours, Shiloh Hendrix was doxxed, denounced, and digitally obliterated. When she and her family tried to raise funds to relocate for their safety, the internet's righteous mob descended again. This time, not because she committed a crime, but because she dared to ask for help after saying something horrible. Now, so we can get a proper timeline on how all this played out, it happened in Rochester, Minnesota, at Soldiers Field Memorial Park, where Hendrix was filmed in an argument involving a black child. The video, shot by a bystander, captured Hendrix using the N-word repeatedly. She later claimed the child had stolen from her toddler's diaper bag and that her outburst was in response to that. The clip spread rapidly across X and TikTok. A second video followed this with the man recording calling it the first time he had seen a racist to a child on the spectrum of autism. Now, almost immediately, Hendrix was identified, her personal information leaked, and calls for punishment poured in from across the internet. Civil rights groups, lawyers, local officials issued statements condemning her behavior. The Rochester NAACP demanded legal action and opened channels for the child's family to seek counsel. Rochester Mayor Kim Norton used the opportunity to reinforce the city's anti-racist initiatives. Meanwhile, the police launched an investigation, and it should be noted, though, that hate speech isn't illegal in America. There's no such thing in a country where free speech exists. We're not the UK. Now, in response to the backlash, Hendrix launched a fundraiser on GiveSendGo titled Help Me Protect My Family. She wrote that her address and social security number had been leaked and that she and her family were facing constant online threats. She said, "I fear that we must relocate. Anything will help." We cannot and will not live in fear. And as of the making of this video, she's raised over $300,000. Now, some donors express support for Hendrix's right to free speech. Others use the fundraiser to express anger about what they see as a cultural imbalance when comparing this to the situation with Karmelo Anthony. A few even posted explicitly racialized justifications for their donations. One donor wrote, "White race is under threat of impending extinction." Another said, "Rather than changing their behavior, minorities insist on trying to police our words." And while those sentiments sparked press outrage, it's worth noting Hendrix herself has not been charged with any crime because, again, hate speech isn't a crime in America. And it should also be noted that there are very similar messages posted under Karmelo Anthony's Give, Send, Go, but they are going in the other direction, from black folks saying that about white folks. Now, here's where the conversation deepens. This isn't about defending Shiloh Hendrix's behavior. It was ugly, offensive, and she admitted to saying what she said. But the real question is, what does it say about her culture that her use of a slur led to doxing, mass public condemnation, and national scrutiny, while Karmelo Anthony's far more violent incident barely provoked a shrug from the online mobs? The answer lies in the narrative framework that now governs public outrage. In today's America, identity doesn't just influence perception, it defines justice. Words, not actions, have become the ultimate barometer of morality. You can scream, stab, loot, or burn, but if the narrative favors you, redemption is built in. If it doesn't, you're kaput, finished. So the contrast between the Shiloh Hendrix and Karmelo Anthony case is stark. One act was fatal, the other was verbal. One raised public sympathy, the other triggered demands for prosecution. One was framed as a product of a system stacked against a young black man. The other was framed as a symptom of white America's moral decay. Now, I have to make it absolutely clear that this isn't a defense of racism. It's a critique of selective outrage, because the moment a society starts calibrating justice based on identity and not action, it abandons any claim to fairness. What happened to Hendrix is the logical endpoint of a culture that treats certain speech as violence and actual violence as resistance. How else do you think we get the Luigi Mangionis of the world? But all that being said, here's a deeper cost. When free speech, even repugnant speech, is treated as a capital offense, we empower a system that doesn't just punish hatred, it polices nonconformity. That system will not stop with racists. It will eventually come for anyone who steps outside the ideological lines of the moment. We're already seeing this in academia, in corporate HR departments, in algorithmic censorship on social media, and in the endless redefinition of what counts as harm. So the parallel between both of these stories exposes how broken the online mob has become. A woman says something disgusting and immediately gets thousands of strangers calling for her death, her kids' removal, and total social destruction. Then when she raises money to flee that chaos, that becomes the next outrage. It's not just about punishment anymore, it's about complete annihilation. Meanwhile, on the other side of the coin, when a teenager stabs another student to death at school and later confesses to it, he's instantly recast as the victim, not of the crime, but of the system. His race becomes a shield, a tool used to justify why he and his family should be allowed to turn the killing into a fundraising campaign. To his defenders, he isn't a perpetrator, he's a symbol, a martyr for the cause, a living indictment of the so-called evils of white America. The narrative warps so far that even public officials play along, like the judge who slashed his bond by 75%, effectively clearing the path for him to walk free while the victim's family buried their son. Needless to say, we didn't arrive here by accident. This is the product of decades of left-wing dominance in media, education, and tech, where narrative became king and nuance became treason. It's why people are more afraid of being labeled racist than of an actual crime. It's why white-collar progressives now feel justified in wishing death on a stranger over a TikTok clip. It's why free speech has been twisted into a partisan issue when it should be a universal principle. Now, the deeper issue here isn't just political, it's spiritual. What we're witnessing in America right now, this moral inversion, this glorification of violence over virtue, speech codes over free thought, and division over unity, it's all the fruit of a culture that has abandoned faith. When you strip God from the center of society, morality doesn't disappear, it gets replaced. And what replaces it isn't some enlightened secular utopia, it's moral relativism. It's cultural Marxism dressed up as equity, using race and identity not to heal but to divide and conquer. Because make no mistake, the end goal of this movement isn't justice, it's power. They don't want equality under God. They want control in his absence. This new religion of wokeness doesn't believe in repentance, only cancellation. It doesn't believe in redemption, only destruction. And at its core, it's not just godless, it's anti-God. That's why truth can be flipped on its head, why good is evil and evil is all of a sudden good. That's why a confessed killer is called a victim, while a foul-mouthed mom becomes public enemy numero uno. That's why people cheer on chaos, as long as it supports their narrative. Needless to say, folks, this is the final stage of the divide and conquer strategy. Invert morality, destroy the middle ground, and ensure no one can speak out without being marked as an enemy. And behind it all is a calculated effort to weaken the foundations of this country, our faith, our God-given freedoms, and our families, so that the entire structure can be toppled. And people like AOC don't even hide this. They thrive in disorder. In fact, they even boast about it. They want the decline of America because they want the American system dissolved so they can replace it with something they can control permanently. And the only thing standing in the way of that, faith, real faith, faith in God and truth and absolute morality. That's why they attack it, because if people still believe in something higher than the state, something more eternal than a hashtag, then the revolution fails. So to be absolutely clear, this was never about equity. This was never about justice. It's about control through chaos. It's about building a new world on the ashes of the old. But first, they have to burn down what made the old world work. Family, faith, and our God-given freedoms. This, folks, is spiritual warfare. And if we don't start calling it that, if we keep fighting moral confusion with political talking points, we'll lose more than elections. We'll lose our entire country. If you truly want to understand where America is right now, just crack open your Bible and read Jeremiah. Because God already laid it out centuries ago. What happens when a nation turns its back on him? Through the prophet Jeremiah, God warned Israel again and again, if you abandon my commandments, if you worship false idols, if you shed innocent blood and twist justice, I will tear your nation apart, not from the outside, but from within. Your leaders will grow corrupt, your people will love lies, foreign nations will rise against you, and your enemies will walk through the gates because you left them wide open in the name of progress. Jeremiah 5:31 says, the prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests rule by their own power. And my people love to have it so. But what will you do in the end? They didn't just tolerate the lies. They wanted them. They craved smooth words, moral convenience, and false peace. And God let them have exactly what they chose. This isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror. We are a modern nation echoing an ancient rebellion. We kill the innocent and call it healthcare. We legalize sin and call it freedom. We silence truth and call it equity. And now we wonder why everything is crumbling, why our children are confused, our streets unsafe, our leaders incompetent, and our enemies emboldened. In Jeremiah 2, God says, my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed out for themselves broken cisterns that can hold no water. That's us. We've rejected the source of truth and tried to build a moral order out of sand. The judgment isn't coming. It's already here. And unless this nation repents, unless we return to the God who made us free, we will see Jeremiah's warning fulfilled all over again. The collapse won't come all at once. It will come through cultural rot, institutional decay, and spiritual blindness until we wake up and realize we're not a nation anymore, just a divided people ruled by chaos, too proud to bow before the only one who can save us. So the question is, how much longer can a nation survive when it forgets who it is and who it answers to? When morality becomes a matter of trend instead of truth, and justice is determined by narrative instead of principle, what kind of future are we really building? Are we so desperate to appear righteous in the eyes of the world that we've forgotten what righteousness even is? These aren't just cultural shifts. They're age-old spiritual fractures, as old as time. And if you're not asking who benefits from this chaos or why truth now feels dangerous to speak, then you're already where they want you to be, silent, confused, and compliant. At some point, every society hits the wall where its illusions collapse. The only question left is whether we'll return to something eternal or keep falling for whatever the world sells us next. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace.